Welcome to the Grow Down on Soil Health, the podcast where we dig deep into sustainable farming practices that can enhance both your land and your bottom line. I'm your host, Dr. Ben West, Executive Director of Farmers for Soil Health, a program established by farmers for farmers, dedicated to improving soil health practices like planting cover crops to enhance the environment and profitability of farmers. This podcast is in partnership with the Soy Checkoff, the Port Checkoff, and the National Corn Growers Association. Today's episode is all about farmer economics, trust, and the future of conservation. Tune in today to learn how this guest is helping bridge the gap between farmers and the supply chains they serve. Today, we're joined by Greg Goodwin, the Director of the Precision Conservation Management Program. Greg brings a strong background in agricultural engineering and soil and water resources, with years of experience helping farmers and conservationists understand how ag practices impact the environment. Since becoming the director of PCM, Greg's helped double the program in just 3 years. Growing up on his family's farm in Crawford County, Illinois, Greg developed a deep appreciation for agriculture's role in society, a passion he carries into his work every day supporting farmers. Greg, thanks for joining us today.
Absolutely. Thank you, Ben. Appreciate the opportunity.
Yeah, really glad you're here. You and I had dinner together a couple years ago, and you're one of our technical service providers for Farmers for Soil Health here in Illinois. Really enjoyed getting to know you and working with you the past couple of years. And I know how deeply passionate you are about agriculture and helping farmers. Man, I know that's why you do what you do. And you do what you do rather than being a farmer. Although you had the opportunity to be a sixth-generation farmer, but it didn't work out that way. Give us a little bit about your background.
Yeah, that's exactly right. So I grew up on a small corn and soybean farm kind of in southeastern Illinois. Wasn't sure exactly what I was going to do coming out of college, but I did want to, I went into agriculture, obviously, studied ag engineering. And, by the time I kind of got out of college, farm was contracted a little bit, and so didn't really know that I wanted to stomach all the debt that it was going to take to really make a career of it myself. But really lucky, my brother-in-law's family has now taken over farming my family's property, and in fact, my sister and brother-in-law have purchased a little bit of my family's land and own it themselves now. So I know that's going to stay in our family for generations, and they've got a couple young boys that I think at least one's pretty interested in farming. So we'll see if it continues on there, but that gives you a little bit of background on kind of where I come from.
Yeah, so still connected to on-the-ground farming.
Yes.
But your background is engineering. So how did you go from a farm kid to being interested in engineering, ag engineering, bioengineering?
Yeah, so growing up, I always excelled more in this sort of STEM classes and things like that, and really just like the idea of engineering, how you really basically use science and apply that to real world situations, and that was what really attracted me in agricultural engineering. I went to the University of Illinois, and some of those early years of courses, you kind of get a variety of all the different types of ways in which that applies, whether that's off-road machinery, food and bioprocess, or soil and water resources. And just had some really impactful professors more in the soil and water side, and kind of gravitated towards that, and then started looking at things like bioreactors and structural practices and how we can use those to, mitigate some of the environmental effects of agriculture, and really just like that, and saw that as a huge challenge. I also really like spending time in the environment. I know you do as well. And so, grew up kind of going boating occasionally, spending time on lakes. And so, protecting those waters to me just became kind of something I gravitated towards and really enjoyed.
And it's taken you all over the world. When you were in college, you went to India on tell us about your India experience.
Yeah. So when I was in school, we had a professor from India, Dr. Prasanna Kalita at the University of Illinois, and really charismatic guy. Anybody that knows him, I think, would say similar things. And he was a professor in the ag engineering department and helped basically lead a group of students alongside Dr. Paul Davidson, another student at the time, who now is actually also a professor in that department at University of Illinois. And they basically helped to facilitate a trip to India, funded by an EPA P3 grant, People, Prosperity, and the Planet. And so had a student team that helped develop a proposal for bioreactors. And that was something that was a really hot topic. It's now accepted as a NRCS BMP, used to mitigate nitrate losses from fields in Illinois and all over the Midwest. But yeah, as a student, we had a chance to go to India to actually install a bioreactor over there. As I'm sure you probably know, population is enormous. So anything they can do to recycle water and improve water quality is just, top of mind. And that was a really impactful student experience.
How long were you there?
We were only there for about a couple of weeks. So we spent about the first week on site there, kind of working with local folks, get the bioreactor established. And then we did have some opportunity to travel locally within the region. We were kind of in north central India. And yeah, got to do some different things. Got to see the Taj Mahal. That was cool.
That was the food. I'm a foodie, and I've developed an appreciation for Indian food. And
yes. So now I can say the food was very good, and I did enjoy it a lot. I think, as a small town Midwestern kid, the level of spice in Indian food was overwhelming after a while. So all of us kind of went through a bit of what they call the deli belly at times, but came out on the other side and developed an appreciation as well. But
I grew up on Southern home cooking, meatloaf and mashed potatoes, and that's a long way from the spices you get in Indian cuisine.
It is. Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. We had to have them tone it down a little bit for the crew we were with.
Yeah. Well, let's dig into conservation a little bit. We're here at the 2025 Farm Progress Show in your backyard here in Illinois. I'm talking to people around here today and other ag meetings I've been to. There's really only one topic that farmers want to talk about right now, and that's the state of the U.S. farm economy. It's a tough year for farmers. A lot of farmers that have been farming a long time say this year it could be worse than the early 80s. So a really tough farm economy, and at the same time, a lot of interest in conservation. But sometimes conservation can be a tough sell when farmers are having a hard time making ends meet. In your role at PCM, and you guys work with farmers every day, and you work with farmers in to help them implement conservation practices every day. How do you see the current state of the economy as either a barrier or maybe an on-ramp to farmers incorporating some conservation practices they've never done in the past, or maybe ramping up practices they're already using?
That's a fantastic question, and I think it is both a challenge and an opportunity. So, here at PCM, we focus primarily on in-field conservation stuff. So actually, the stuff I did on the India trip, bioreactors, things are more edge-of-field practices. We don't focus as much on that, but I use that as a segue to mention, I think where we really see opportunity based on the work we currently do is helping farmers become more efficient with respect to tillage and fertilizer use and things like that is really where the opportunity lies. If you're what has been characterized in some ways as a high-cost producer, you tend to use a lot of inputs, things like that. There may be opportunities to back off a little bit and see an immediate profitability signal as it relates to that. Just trying to really hone in and understand, is every additional input you're putting into your system paying for itself with respect to additional bushels to cover the cost of that. And so, yeah, with tillage, we see where a lot of farmers could probably back off a little, save a tillage pass, possibly two, immediate profitability signal there. Same on the nitrogen input side for corn production. Are you eking out those additional bushels with every unit of nitrogen you're putting on? If not, immediate profitability signal there. But then on the challenges side, I'd say, yeah, farmers that are in this position of trying cover crops for the first time, if you've not had any experience already there, might want to really look hard at that and then really also examine what sort of incentive opportunities are available to you if you're going to do that. We'll never discourage someone from dipping their toe in. We always going to encourage that. And maybe if you've already been doing it, you see a path for how to scale up and not see a huge hit to your economics. But as you pointed out, Ben, like in this time we're in right now, farmers even in the most fertile soils and areas are struggling to be profitable, at all. Earlier we heard some comments, maybe 5% of total farms nationwide
That's stunning.
profitable.
That's stunning. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's really hard to mention anything that's going to add any risk to farms, see them want to take that on right now.
Yeah, and so your comment, there are some practices farmers could implement in year one, be more efficient, and see some financial savings or financial benefit. Other practices and cover crops is a really good example. Research shows they will pay for themselves, but it can take 3 to 5 years to get to that point. So if a farmer comes to you today and says, "Hey, Greg, I've been thinking about cover crops. I've never tried them before," you know that farmer is likely right on the edge of profitability or not profitable this year. What would you advise them?
This gets maybe a little overused, but I think cereal rye ahead of soybeans is always an easy first step. We see that in guidance, not only, and the data bear that out in our program, but, we see that guidance from a lot of different conservation programs as well. I think, Midwest Cover Crop Council also suggests cereal rye ahead of soy is like an easy first step. Don't try it on all your fields. In fact, probably even start with some of your more marginally profitable fields, even in good years. So, don't necessarily try it on your best fields to start. Maybe start a little bit more marginal, and just go from there. Terminate it early. Don't necessarily wait and let it get super high. That's something we see as far as a common misstep. It's easy for things to get away from you in the spring if it remains a little bit wet. And so probably, preemptively terminate, get ahead of it, ahead of your beans and give your crop a good opportunity to yield out and be profitable. And so that's probably where I'd tell most folks to start, and then just work your way forward from there.
Yeah, start with a practice, a version of cover crops that's harder to mess up and doesn't present much operational risk. And then, of course, pursue some of the financial incentives that are out there right now to help mitigate that early cost of adopting a new practice. Farmers for Soil Health is one. Farmers can enroll in, but there are others. And, I think what's really great about organizations like yours, farmers have people coming at them from every angle, trying to convince them to buy this, use this to boost productivity. But they really need people like you and your organization that aren't selling anything. You're just giving them unbiased, the best advice and guidance that you can based on what the science says. I'm curious how farmers are they're so discerning in who they listen to and who they put their trust in. And your organization has the trust of a lot of farmers. What's key? How do you build that trust, and how do you keep it?
Excellent question. And I think, I've been here now about 3.5 years with PCM. And I think what I've seen is just, you have to know the right balance of challenging but not being too pushy when it comes to things like we're trying to see and the sort of difference we're trying to make with agriculture as a whole and conservation adoption. And so obviously we've just talked about it. We take this very economically minded approach. We try with the way we approach conservation to just make the economics of it super transparent. And so then I think when farmers understand we're not trying to sell you something, it's free to join the program. You can get benchmarking of your practices financially and from a sustainability standpoint for free without ever being pushed to sign up into any kind of incentive program, that they start to see that as like, okay, this group is really advocating for me. They're trying to help me understand this. They're maybe putting my data to work for me, letting me see it from a different angle than I've ever examined it before. And so I think that does go a really long way with establishing that trust, and then eases their fear with respect to taking that next first step, maybe trying something a little different. They now see from the benchmarking report they receive that, okay, maybe my tillage approach is a little overdoing it, and I could eke out more bushels from not overtilling, or there is going to be enough production from my scaling back a little bit to pay for self. So I think that's kind of how we tend to approach it, and just try to be transparent. If, we've obviously established rules for how we do things based on what we think farmers want, but we understand that doesn't meet the need and isn't going to be the exact right fit for every farmer. And so we try to make farmers aware of all the different sort of incentive programs, federal funding opportunities locally available to them, and just pair them with the right approach to get them the most bang for their buck related to whatever they're currently doing and whatever steps they're willing to take next.
Yeah, and it seems as I think about many of these practices, communicating to farmers about them, some pieces of it are easy. Take cover crops. Like, we pretty much know how to advise farmers about how to incorporate cover crops, how to establish them, how to manage them. We pretty much know over time what kind of agronomic benefits that's going to provide them. We know what many of the incentive programs are, the federal and state and local incentive programs. What we don't know is what is the value of those environmental outcomes going to be long term. And right over the past 3 or 4 years, all anybody's really wanted to talk about is carbon, which is great. There's some value in that discussion. But I thought it's missed the mark somewhat, because the environmental outcomes of across the suite of these conservation practices is much broader than just carbon. Better soil retention, better water quality, you go down the list, better wildlife habitat, lots of outcomes. How do you think we as an industry help to start framing that conversation more holistically than just pounds or tons of carbon sequestered?
I think it's a fantastic question, a fantastic way to look at it. I don't have the answer. I think part of it is why we've gravitated to carbon so much, right, is because of climate change, and it's something that we do at least have a system to account for it. And we know that the greenhouse gases accumulating in the atmosphere have a negative effect, and so it's become something that we both see as having an immediate impact. It's quantifiable, and we have a system to at least analyze for it, even if that system is imperfect and there's lots of error in that and it's spatially very variable. We at least have a system to account for what we think the financial implication of that might be, and can kind of understand the environmental impact and cost there. I think for these other things, if we can figure out a way to come up with systems to better account for them, that's step one. It's like you can't manage what you can't measure, and I think we understand that there are models out there that do give us pretty decent estimates around soil erosion and water quality loss, or water quality impacts and things like that from agriculture. I think some of these other things like diversity and things, we could come a long way, we could get better, but we maybe just don't have as mature of metrics around some of this other stuff to create an accounting system where then companies are ready to invest because they can see a path. They can see how it relates to the claims they're going to be able to make about their products, and we create a tangible step or link between them and the changes on farm that we want to be able to incentivize and see. And there are some other programs out there, Soil and Water Outcomes Fund out of Iowa Soy. I think they do a pretty good job. They've linked not only carbon but water quality benefits. I know that they've got at least some different entities that are willing to pay for the environmental or the water quality credit side of things, and that's kind of how they are trying to monetize multiple environmental outcomes. But I think overall we just haven't seen how that's happening yet, and or the right path to do that yet.
And I think what you said about you manage what you can measure, that's really insightful. The reality is all of the metrics we might be interested in pertaining to the sustainability or environmental outcomes of a farm operation, many of those metrics are difficult to measure, like biodiversity. That's a very complex issue about biodiversity of a farm. How would you begin to go about measuring it? And then when you develop techniques to measure it, sometimes the measurement of the outcome are more expensive than actually producing the outcome. So it seems like we've got to figure out ways to develop cheap, reliable, robust metrics to measure any of the environmental outcomes. That we might want to be driving towards, and that's going to produce a lot of data. And I guess let's end with this discussion. Data are a big topic among farmers as well. As precision agriculture and technology is allowing us to collect more and more data at the farm level, at the field level, at the acre level. Those data have value, and farmers have really strong opinions about what happens to those data, who has access to them, and how they can benefit from those data. I know you talk about this with farmers a lot. What are farmers that you talk to? What are they talking about in this whole big ag, data discussion?
Also a great question. I think we see a pretty vast spectrum there. You've always got like innovators, early adopters, right, that are as data heavy as you can possibly be. And we talk to them some. I'll throw out this name, Brandon Honeycutt out of Nebraska, super progressive farmer. I think he's mentioned they collect data from all different types of software and systems on their farm. But in some ways, I think it's a drowning in information, starving for knowledge situation. It's not always obvious how you put that to work for your own farm and use it to make new decisions. I think there's certainly some kinds of data where that's the case, and I would say he's definitely doing that and can come up with tangible examples of how he's putting some of that back to work. But I think in some ways we do struggle to understand what we do with the full breadth of different data that we can now, as you point out, collect at a really high resolution at a really intense time frequency. What do we do with that? I think where we look, how we look at it is we try to focus in on what we think is going to be valuable to farmers and put that back to work for them. And we've kind of, again, come up with this like benchmarking approach for how we do that. But the data privacy piece is also paramount. You alluded to that. We take that piece very seriously. Only a few key people within our program are able to sort of see the data after they sign agreements to never do anything harmful with it. Also, that goes back and directly relates to the trust piece that you alluded to earlier. I think, only selling farmer data when they've given you permission, like in our program, they have the opportunity to direct their own data. I think we see that getting baked into more and more farmer agreements when it comes to data sharing. I think, no question, it's very valuable. Privacy is paramount to trust. And so we look at it from those perspectives and then are exploring what we think we can provide from a value proposition back to farmers from all that information.
If you're into technology, next few decades are going to be fascinating in agriculture as we, again, through various systems, collect more and more data on the farm. AI is coming to help analyze those data, help farmers make better real-time, day-to-day decisions based on real data. Seems like there's some real opportunities for rapid improvement in farm operations.
I fully agree. I am actually super excited to see where this whole AI space goes, especially as it relates to agriculture. I mean, the level of compute that we now have is mind-boggling. Yes, as probably most people, mess around with ChatGPT and all these different things, and what it can now do is just crazy to me.
I use it every day.
Yeah,
I use it every day.
I'm with you.
Yeah,
I'm baking it into my daily rhythms as well, and yeah, I think it's super fascinating in our ability to crunch. Even have it write code to be able to help crunch data and numbers. It's amazing.
Yeah. Well, it's been a fascinating conversation. I think over the next 2 or 3 years, we'll see what happens with the U.S. farm economy. But I think it's going to be quite a story to see how we advance conservation during this very stressful time for farmers. But with programs like Farmers for Soil Health, partners like you, I do think there's a real opportunity to help farmers see that conservation is not just good for their land, but over the long term, good for their financial sustainability as well. And if we've learned nothing else from this farm economy right now, we're going to have to continue to do that to be more and more efficient. And luckily, many of these conservation practices also lead to better environmental outcomes long term.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. I'm excited to see where it all goes.
Yeah. Well, Greg, really appreciate you joining us. Appreciate all your work with Farmers for Soil Health. Enjoy the rest of Farm Progress. I know it's a big show. It's a big party here, and weather's perfect. It feels like fall.
Yep. Thank you, Ben. Really appreciate you having me on.
Well, thank you for tuning in to this episode for the Grow Down on Soil Health. If you enjoyed this episode, make sure to subscribe, follow us on social media, and check out our website, farmersforsoilhealth.com, where you can find out more about our program and how you can get involved. Stay tuned here for more insights on sustainable farming practices. Until next time.